Now, I do want to make a distinction here. I am not saying that a fully Pigouvian tax system is the answer. I don't know what the answer is. Like I don't know. I don't know the exact perfect tax plan. And that's not what really this episode's about. What I'm more concerned with is the fact that it took me this long to learn about this option. But I do think it's important to make a case for transitioning to a more Pigouvian tax model. We really need to stop taxing income and property and start taxing things like traffic and pollution and waste instead. I really think that isn't that crazy that we would start to transition into some more Pigouvian systems. Now, I understand that there are people that will disagree with the idea of implementing any of these types of taxes in America. They don't want to even hear the word taxes, and I totally get that. But for for some people that are against it, I want to remind you that we already have them in the form of those sin taxes I was talking about with alcohol and cigarettes. So I do think it's important to note that if you don't think this is a good idea, I understand that. However, you have to acknowledge though that we do already do it. So that is an important piece of this. But I also think that there are some people who are opposed to what I'm saying and they're opposed to any taxes like this because they think that I'm talking about implementing them on the federal level. And what I'm asking you to consider is to look at it at more of like a local level, state level, and then local level, right? Cities and towns. I think that is important because I turn to the example of Singapore and their congestion tax that Dr. Brynjolfsson had mentioned. And I turn to that to make my argument because you might be thinking like, oh, Nick, that's Singapore. And of course they can pull that off because it's so small. We can never do that here in America. It's too populated. But Singapore has a population that's more than double that of the city of Houston, Texas, with half the land area. So when I say like the state and local level, like cities, for example, I do think it's applicable. I really do. There's a lot of potential for traffic in a place like Singapore, where once again, they have twice the population of Houston and half the area. There's a potential for a ton of traffic. So I think when you look at it like that, it's proof that it can absolutely be done here on a more local level. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that Singapore is the fourth richest country on earth. So you also have to keep that in mind. This if you're not super familiar with like some of these other countries, you might not have an understanding of actually how wealthy Singapore is. So I think if you're trying to take that spin on how could it work here because Singapore is nothing like this, I really do think at that state and local level it really really is. It's really really comparable. And so I would direct you to an article that was written by Luca Ventura for Global Finance, and he says, quote, "How did Singapore become so prosperous? When the city state became independent in 1965, one half of its population was illiterate. 50 hold on. 50% of the people couldn't read. Think about what I'm telling you. 50% of the people could not read in 1965. Half the people couldn't read. And he also says, quote, they have virtually no natural resources. But Singapore pulled itself up by its bootstraps through hard work and smart policy, becoming one of the most business friendly places in the world. In 1965, half of their population could not read. And today, in 2021, they're the fourth richest country in the world. And the most important phrase that he says there is smart policy. So Singapore's been at this since the 1970s, and I think it shows. The congestion tax structure has led Singapore to being one of the least congested cities in the entire world. Now, part of the reason that they have less traffic is because the tax system incentivizes the population to take public transportation, because it saves them a lot of money. So basically, like part of the tax structure that they have is like certain roads, the tolls on those roads are more expensive at certain times, like rush hour and stuff like that. And then also, it's very expensive to own a car there. And so, because of that, they're more reliable on public transportation, but the public transportation there is phenomenal. Like, it isn't like America. But they're not sitting over there in some sort of sad dystopian reality where no one can own a car, so they all got to ride the fucking wild west that is public transportation in America. Like, that's not that's not a thing. Like, they're not dealing with the same type of issues we are. So yes, they do use public transportation more, and that is a result of having this Pigouvian tax structure. But you can't make the mistake of conflating the two, like as if it's like, oh, they're just like their public transportation is just like America. Like that'd be pretty sad if we all had to do that. It's nothing like it is here, and I know that's critical, but it's true. Our public transportation is awful, and I want to point here to a report that was done by McKinsey. So if you're not familiar with McKinsey, McKinsey is one of the largest consulting companies in the world. Um, if you're really not familiar with that world, just think about it like when you think of like somebody who is like in business, like I'm a businessman or I'm a businesswoman, right? One of those people, they do that for a career. They make a lot of money doing business consulting. That is what McKinsey is doing. McKinsey is hired by companies all over the world, some of the biggest companies in the world, and basically they are the problem solvers. They come in and solve any problem you have. They're full of like Ivy League graduates. There's Olympians that work there. There's, people that are Rhodes Scholars work there. So this is a serious, serious consulting company. And the reason that I point to them is because they published a report in June of 2018 that was titled Elements of Success Urban Transportation Systems of 24 Global Cities. And in that report, they found that 86% of the population is, quote, satisfied with the overall situation in public transport. And 71% are satisfied with the overall situation in private transport. So think about that. In today's day and age, especially if you live in America, finding 86% of the population is happy with something, or 71% even is happy with something, is tremendous. Now, what's also important to note is that McKinsey also looked at Chicago. And let's just say that in that instance, the situation was not as satisfying to the residents when it came to transportation. And look, I get the idea that cars being more expensive and some of these taxes might freak you out. I get that the idea of having to ride public transportation everywhere might be a deal breaker for you. But just remember that, once again, what I'm saying is we could adopt some of this structure. I'm not saying that every single city has to do the exact same thing as Singapore. Like, we have a lot of really smart people in America who I think could just take some of the aspects of these systems, some of the aspects of what Singapore is doing correctly, and apply them here in a way that would make sense, that people would be comfortable with. I'm not saying we have to go to some model that looks exactly like them. I'm just saying it seems like there's some very obvious, very practical options that we have that already exist. And so I would love to see some of those used here. But once again, I think like policy change is our best chance there. And that's tough right now. It's truth. It's just the truth of the matter, to be honest. So I think at the end of the day, I think it's an interesting topic because of that idea of alternatives, right? Like, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, honestly, Nick, I didn't even know like that type of taxation was an option. Like, I didn't even really realize it. And I think that's awesome. Like, I think that's awesome because I think that right there proves my point. Like, you guys shouldn't have to listen to me, like, to learn about this. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not like some sort of like genius economics professor who has all the answers here. Like, but Like, you shouldn't have to listen to me, and I'm some guy on YouTube is the one who, like, explains this alternative option to you. I just wish there was a situation where we had more of that information available to us so we could know the wide range of possibilities that we have, honestly, when it comes to our money. And so, I say I wish that were the case, but I am trying to, through this podcast, just hopefully one person learns about this, and we can start to educate the population on these type of alternatives to the status quo. But once again, at the end of the day, like, you know, who knows what I'm even talking about? Like, let me tell you, I found out that my fiance's cousin has a dog that has more Instagram followers than me. So the reality is, like, everything I'm saying on here, like, I'm just a guy on YouTube talking. Like, it's, I don't have all the solutions here, and I don't pretend to. But with that being said, I think we can all agree, let's just keep learning new shit so we can continue to educate ourselves more and more about our options. We can keep learning about these alternatives. I really do think the world is a better place when the population en masse knows about these alternatives, right? How about instead of 8,500 people listening to, to be honest with you, an expert talk about this, right? How about we get in a situation where instead of 8,500, it's 85 million, right? And I think that is our best chance to move forward and our best chance to get those policies implemented. Is just more people to be educated on our alternatives to the status quo.